Hi! A couple of days ago, the react-redux team released a new version of their library. This version now contains new API functions, which are hooks that allow us to use Redux in our components without having to use the connect higher order component like we did before. In this video, we're gonna be building a simple to-do app using Redux and these new hooks. Now, if you're not familiar with Redux, I suggest you go and learn it before, because I will not be going over the basics of it in this video. And if you're not familiar with React hooks, I have a mini series on this channel that will get you up to speed with React hooks. If you're familiar with both, then you're right at home. First, I want to demonstrate the app itself. So this is the app, nothing visually impressive because that's not the scope of this video. We have a list of to-dos. We can add a new one. Let's say a new task, and it adds it, and if I click the checkbox it ticks it off, and if I click the X it removes it, and if I untick it, it goes back to being unticked or unchecked. Alright, so this is the code for this app using the normal traditional approach using Connect. So we have these two components, the input, which is at the top, and the list. And here we have our Redux file where we have an initial state, our store, our reducer with 3 actions to add, to toggle, and to delete a to-do. So this will be mostly the same, but here in the input, for example, we use the connect to and we use a map state to props to extract the data from our state, and we map dispatch to map action to props to actually declare which action to use and use it from the props. So this is the traditional approach, and if you want to know more why this is better, you need to go and check out the documentation for hooks to understand why removing higher order component gives us a clearer tree of components and is more efficient when using React. Anyway, enough of the theory and let's get to the code. Alright, here on my desktop I'm going to open a terminal window. I'm going to use create react app to do just that and call it redux hooks. Alright, now that it's done installing, I can cd into it, cd react, or rather redux hooks, and I'm gonna open it using VS Code. You can open it using any editor you're using. So here I'll open the terminal and I'm gonna install a couple of things. So number 1 is Redux. Number 2, I'm gonna install UUID to give our to-dos random IDs, and number 3 is gonna be React Redux, and I'm gonna say @next. And what this does is, because right now maybe it's different by the time you're doing this tutorial, the version that's got the hooks is the alpha version, so it's not we have to add the next to install the latest version regardless of whether it's stable or not. Alright, now that it's done installing, let's open up the source folder. Actually, I'm gonna delete a couple of things here. We don't need this test file. We don't need the index CSS, we don't need the logo. And here in the index.js, I'm going to remove the index CSS. And in the app.js, I'm going to remove the logo. And here I'm going to remove everything. And instead, I'll return a div with the class of main, which I'll style later. And here, this is where we're going to have our input and our to-do list. So let's just actually add them now. So let's say to-do input. And the other one is the to-do list. Oops, actually, I don't want a closing tag. I want it to just close itself like this. Actually, let's start with the Redux stuff. So here, I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call this redux.js. Usually, I would split everything into multiple files, because this application is really small, so I'm just going to put everything in this one file. So here we need the create store from Redux, and here I'm gonna import UUID, actually just UUID from UUID/v4 to generate a random ID. And usually you would have an empty initial state, but and then when your application loads, you fetch your data from the server. But we don't have a server. This is just a mock-up thing. So we'll have an initial state. So let's say const initial state equals, we're gonna have an object, and it's gonna have a to-dos, and inside of to-dos, which is an array, you're gonna have two to-dos. First one will have an ID of UUID, a name. Let's call this, I don't know, go to the gym, and of course the complete is false by default. And let's add another one. ID is the same, UUID, a name. Let's say this is the do laundry, and let's say we've done our laundry, but let's have one that's complete. So complete is true, and here we're going to use the create store. So here we're going to export our store. So let's do export const store equals create store. We're going to give it the actually we need to give it a reducer. So let's just say reducer for now, and then we'll create it in a bit. So the first will be a reducer, the second will be the initial state, and usually in the third parameter you might configure some middleware like Thunk or any other custom middleware, but we're not going to use any middleware here. But what we are going to use is the DevTools, so the Chrome DevTools. So here I'm going to check if we have them. So we'll say window.devtools extension. So if this is true, then we will call window.devtools DevTools extension, like a function like this. So now this will give us access to the DevTool extension. Now here we'll create our reducer. So say function reducer, and we don't need to export it because we're only going to use it here. This will take a state and an action, and it will switch on the action.type, and we'll have three cases. So case number one is add to do, and here we'll just return the current state. Now of course our state only has to do's, but it's just good practice to spread the state anyway. So I'm gonna return the to do's, and here we'll spread the existing to do's. So state.to-dos, and we'll add the new to do, which will be in the payload of the action. So action.payload. And by the way, there's another approach which is pretty cool. If you don't want to type always action, you can just destructure the type and the payload like this, and here we'll just say type, and here we'll just say payload, which makes it a bit cleaner. And yeah, this is it for this case. The second case will be the toggle to do, and this, if it's complete, it's gonna make it incomplete. If not, it's gonna make it complete. So we return the current state. So we spread this, spread the state. And here what we need to do, no pun intended, inside the to-dos, we need to find this to-do that has the same ID as we were passed in the payload, and then change the complete of that to-do. So we will say state.todos.map, and then here for each to-do, we'll have a condition. And this condition will be to-do.id. If it equals to actually there's no action, just payload. If the ID equals payload, then, so we'll have a ternary operator, so a question mark, then we will return this object, which is, we just spread this to do. And for the complete, so complete, for the property of complete, we're gonna give it the value of not to do dot complete. So we invert it. Else, so colon, then if it's not this ID, then we just return this to do inside of the array. So this should do. Now here we'll have another case, which is the delete to do. So delete to do, and here we'll just return the state, state. And here we'll use the filter method to remove this ID, the to do with this ID that we are passed. So here we'll say we return state.todos.filter. And what filter does is that it removes all the elements that meet this certain condition. So we say to do, where to do, and our condition will be to do.id must not equal the payload. So if it does equal, it's going to get removed. So here, this should be done. So the reducer is done. And here we'll create our actions. So our first action, actually, I forgot to add the default case. So here we say default, we just return state. So here we do our actions. So we have 3 actions. First one, we need to export them because we need to use them in our components. So here we'll say export const add to do action. You can just name that add to do, but later I'm gonna name the function itself add to do, so I don't want any ambiguity in variable naming. So I'm just gonna name this action. So it's gonna take a to do, and it's gonna return a type. So it's gonna return an action with the type add to do, and the payload will be this to do that's got passed in. So payload is to do. And like you see here, when this type is received, it's gonna actually add this payload to our array. Here we're gonna have another action, export const toggle to do complete, or let's call it action. And here we'll take a to do ID, and it will return. This is, by the way, shorthand. Do in parentheses curly braces shorthand for just doing curly braces and then saying return object. So here we'll return a type of toggle to do. By the way, guys, these types usually we put them into variables to avoid any typos. But like I said, this is a small demo application. I'm not going to go too much into the good practices of Redux. So here the payload will be the to do ID, and now if it's received by toggle to do, it's gonna map through the array and change the complete key on that element. So the last but not least, delete export const delete to do action, which takes a to do ID and returns an action with the type delete to do and a payload of to do ID. So now we will delete that from the array. Alright, so we're done with this Redux file. Now let's go to the app and provide this store to our application. And here we need to import the provider. Import provider from react-redux, and we need to import the store. So import store from the same level Redux, the file that we just created. And here we need to wrap all of our application inside of a provider. So provider, and this takes in a store, which is the store we got from our file. And inside the provider, we paste back our stuff, our markup. Let's import these components that we haven't created yet. So let's say import to do input from, it's going to be in a folder called components / to do input. And the other one will be the to do list from the same folder / to do list. Actually, let's go to the app CSS and style this main class. I'm going to remove everything here. I'm going to say .main. So this is our main kind of container div. I'm just going to give it a max width of 350. And I'm going to give it some margin top. Actually top and bottom. And on the right and left, I'm going to give it auto. And that's it for now. Let's save all files and see if our application runs without any. Actually, it's not going to run because we don't have these components. Let me create them first. So create a folder called components. And inside of here, we're going to have two files, the to-do list.js and a to-do, input.js. So in our input, we just need to import React from, React. And it's going to be a functional component, of course. So to do input, const to do input equals props. And actually we don't need props. And here we're going to have, let's do our return statement. Here we'll have a form with the onSubmit of onSubmit. And inside of here, I'm gonna have a div so that I can style it later, call this form div. And here I'm gonna have an input with a type text and a name of, do we need the name? We don't need the name. We're not gonna use the controlled approach. Well, actually we are. I'm gonna use a generic onChange. So I need the name here. Let's call it to do. Let's give it a placeholder. Say add a to do, a value of, actually no, this is a dynamic value of to do, because we're going to use set state. Not set state, use state hook. And here we'll use, we'll give it an onChange, which is going to be called onChange. That's it. And here we'll have a button of type submit, and it's gonna say add to do. Here we need these two functions, onSubmit and onChange. So the onChange, so we'll say const onChange equals, gonna take an event, and here it's gonna, actually we need the useState hook. So let's get useState from React, and here we'll say const to do and set to do equals use state, and the default value will be an empty string. And yeah, so this is it. So in the onChange, we just need to use the set to do to set the value of our to do. So we'll say set to do to event.target value. And this will work in any form with multiple fields because it's generic. And here we'll say const onSubmit. We'll as well take an event. We'll do event.prevent default so that we don't refresh the page or do the default behavior. So here we'll do some basic validation. We'll say if to do.trim equals an empty string that we just return because we didn't type anything, or just typed a white space. And here we just actually we need now to bring in the action from Redux, this action, this add to do action that we created. So what we need to do is we need to get our use actions. So if we go to the documentation, so here we have our first hook that we're going to use from here is the use actions hook, which is the hook that lets us get one of the actions that we created in our Redux file, in our Redux setup. So here we'll actually import that. So we'll say import use actions from react-redux, and we need to import the action itself. So let's say import forgot what it is. Add to do action. Add to do action from, go back one level and we go to Redux. And here we simply say const, let's call it add to do. So this hook returns one function with some variations, which we'll see later. Here we'll say use actions, and this will take a callback. And we will give our callback any, so our callback can take an argument and it cannot take. But in this case, it needs to take an argument because our action itself needs an argument to do. So here our callback will be to do. And what it will do, it will just call the add to do action with this to do. So now this action is bound to this add to do function. So here in the onSubmit, we just need to call this add to do. So here we'll say add to do, and we will pass it our to do, which is an object, which is going to have an ID. Actually, we need to bring in UUID. So import UUID from UUID/v4. And here the ID will be UUID as a function. And the name will be this to do value. So to do. And the complete by default will be false. Alright, this should be it for this component. We need to export, or actually we could just export it from here. We can just say export default like this, and we need to type something here, otherwise it's not going to run. So here let's say import react from react. Let's say, or let's just do as well export default, and here we just return, as for now, return a paragraph saying to do's like this. Let's save all files and do npm start. We typed a lot of code. Let's hope this runs without any error. Alright, there's a problem here. Oh, I put a semicolon. Oops, okay, save. Cool, no errors. Alright, so this is our app. It only has the input, and if I go to the Redux DevTools, alright, so this is our current state. It's the initial state, nice, and it's got our initial state. And here, if I type something new to do, and I hit add to do, it should add it to our state. Alright, and it does. So it dispatches the add to do action, and it adds this new to do with a complete of false and a new ID. Cool. Let's actually reset this field once we add a new to do. So we just simply do set to do, and we just set it to an empty string. Now if we go back, if we just add something, it will empty it and it will add it to our state, and it does. Cool. Now let's work on our to-do list component. So here in the to-do list, we need to get our to-dos. So first thing is we're gonna use the use selector right here, the use selector hook, which gives a callback which takes a state, and then it picks from the state what what data that we want to listen to, which is similar to map state to props. So here we'll say const to dos. We need to get all our to dos from the state. Will be we need to get the hook. So let's say import use selector, and we're gonna use actions here as well. So I'm gonna import it now from react-redux, and here we need our actions as well. So import, we have the toggle to do action, and the delete to do action from, go back one level to Redux like this. And here we'll say const to dos equals use selector, and this has a callback which takes the state. And here what we want to get is from this state we need the to-dos, so we just say state.todos. Simple as that, guys. Now we have our to-dos stored here, and whenever they change here as well. So here inside of the return, let's remove this, let's do parentheses. I'm gonna return a UL with the class to-do-list so we can style it. And by the way, we can create another component for this, for a single to-do, but for this application I'm just gonna put them here. So here we're gonna iterate through all the to-dos. So we say to-dos.map, and for each to-do we're gonna do parentheses, so we just return stuff. And here what we're gonna return, first we're gonna have the input for the checkbox. So here we'll have an input of type equals checkbox, and for the checked value, which tells it whether it's checked or not, we're just going to use the todo.complete, which is a boolean. And for the onChange, so whenever this changes, we're going to call a function called toggle todo, and we pass it our todo ID, which will use the toggle todo action. And that's it for the input. And here we'll have a span. So let's have a span with a class name. And now this depends on whether it's complete or not. So if it's complete, I want to give it a class complete, which will have a line through it. So we'll say todo.complete and do a ternary operator. If so, we give it a class of complete. If not, we'll just say null, so we won't have any class. And inside of this span, we're going to have the name of the to-do. So todo.name, like this. And after the span, we're going to add another span for the delete button with a class name of delete button. And this will just have an X in it. Well, actually, it needs an onClick so that it will handle the deletion. So here, onClick delete todo, and we pass it todo.id. And ID here is lowercase, and this is it. We need to create these toggle to do action. Well, actually, they're not going to be toggle to do action. We're going to change the names so that we don't confuse ourselves. We're just going to say toggle to do and delete to do. And here we'll say const toggle to do equals, again, use actions. And our action will take a to do ID, and what it will do, it will just call the toggle to do action with this toggle to do ID that we passed it. And we could just copy this and do the same for deleting. So for deleting, let's call this delete to do, and don't forget to change this as well. And this should work. I'll save, and there's a problem with the span. Actually, this needs to be wrapped in an li. So here we'll have an li, and everything needs to be inside the li, and we need to give this a key because React needs to map this. So we'll give this the key of ID because it's unique, and let's save. Cool, it runs, and if we go to our app, we get no to-dos. And that's because expected onChange listener to be a function instead. Got an object. Oh, because here actually I need to bind. I don't call the function like that. I just need to pass a reference. So let's say bind and just pass null. It doesn't matter what you pass here. So here as well, we need to say .bind and just bind to null. And let's go back. All right, cool, it's working. So we get our to-dos, and the checked one is actually checked, but of course we don't want this styling. Let me see how I can style this actually. Actually this X, we just need to give it a background, yeah, of red and some padding and change it to white. So let me look at the Redux. Oops, where are we? Here. Okay, so if I click this, oops, not here. It calls toggle to do, and it changes to do to true, the complete to true. And if I click this, I untick that second one. It changes. It calls toggle to do, and it changes the second one complete to false. Cool. So it's working. All right. So let's add some styling here. So here we will style the UL. So UL dot what is it? To do list. Here, let's remove that list style type. So let's style type, let's give it none. Let's give it no padding because usually there's a padding on the left. And I'm just gonna copy this. And for the li inside of it, we need to give it some margin. So 10 pixels and 0 on the right and left. And for the span, that's complete. So span.complete. I want to give it a text decoration of line through so that it's like ticked, like crossed. And for the span with the delete button, so delete button, I'm gonna give it a background color of red, color of white, padding of 3 pixels, and let's make it float right. And actually as well, let me change the cursor on it. So span.delete button on hover, let's say cursor pointer, so it looks like it does something. And for our form div, did we give the form div class? Yeah, form div on here. Let's align everything to the middle. So let me close this command line. Let's say text align center, and for the form div input, so form div input, I'm gonna give it like some width of 250. Alright, let's save everything. Let's look at our app. Alright, it looks much better. So we get this X here, and if we click it, the to do is gone. And if we add a new one, let's say go outside or cook dinner. Don't know why we'd have that on a to-do list, but why not? And if I click here, it ticks them. And of course, everything on in the state is persisting. Where is it? This tab is always changing spots. All right, so yeah, we're getting all these actions dispatched, and yeah, so it's done right now. And if I were to pull the where is it? The old version of it. Let me put them side by side and show you the difference. So this would be the to-do input. You'd have to bring in the connect, and you see here we have to add this higher order component connect and pass the map state to props, and we have to write that and pass it and pass the actions here, which is a bit confusing. And it does save us a bit of lines of code, but it makes the application run smoothly. Plus, if we were to go here, let's open the React developer tools. If we open our tree, you see it's very simple. We get provider, we get our components. I don't know why they say unknown right now. And we get our UL and li. If we were to use connect, we will get a really deeply nested tree, and the more components we'll have, the more nested it becomes, and it becomes so like hard to traverse and debug. So yeah, so this is it with the React Redux hooks. Let me know in the comments if you like this, if you learned from it, if you're excited about using Redux with hooks. I know I am. I forgot to mention that I'm going to post links in the description for both the repository using the connect and the repository using the hooks with Redux, and with use cases of use actions with different syntax if that suits you. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.